The golden afternoon sun filtered softly through the linen curtains of a modest Airbnb nestled in the heart of Brooklyn, New York. Inside the living room, Leah Walters, a 37-year-old mother, sat silently on a floral-patterned couch, her silver laptop open in front of her. Her posture was that of someone who had been holding her breath for years. And in truth, she had. 2 long, agonizing years had passed since her daughter vanished. Each passing day added a new weight to her shoulders, a new wrinkle of worry to her face, as though time had stopped the moment her world unraveled. Across the room, her husband, Stephen, age 40, paced back and forth with his cell phone pressed tightly to his ear. His voice was clipped and businesslike, the tone of a man who had repeated the same painful details to countless strangers in authority. "Yes, we just arrived in New York," he confirmed, glancing out the window, his free hand resting on his hip. "We're ready to start. We'll be at the station in about an hour." He ended the call and looked over at Leah, who hadn't lifted her gaze from the screen. Leah typed slowly, methodically into Google Maps, pulling up the address Stephen had just recited aloud. She zoomed in and out with practiced precision, eyes scanning the unfamiliar streets of New York with attention that never quite left her face. "I'm just looking at the area," she murmured, more to herself than to her husband. Brooklyn was nothing like Chapel Pine, Idaho, their hometown. In Chapel Pine, neighbors left their doors unlocked. Children walked to school on their own. People trusted each other. Until 2 years ago, when trust shattered. It was after a Sunday baptism class that their daughter Helena, then 12, disappeared. She had walked with friends to the corner deli just across from the church, a familiar routine. But she never made it home. The police searched the woods. Volunteers canvassed the streets. Flyers were printed. Tears were shed. Days turned to weeks. Weeks to months. Then silence. And now, 2 years later, this small Airbnb served as a launching pad for a new search, prompted by the first credible tip they had received in months. An anonymous caller claiming a girl matching Helena's description had been seen near Prospect Park. "It's good we picked this Airbnb," Leah said quietly. "It's close to the park, and there are churches nearby. That matters." She glanced briefly at her husband, who was unpacking their suitcase in the kitchenette. Stephen grunted in response. Since Helena's disappearance, his relationship with faith had crumbled. Where Leah had clung tighter to church and prayer, Stephen had withdrawn. He couldn't stomach the pitying glances, couldn't bear the hollow reassurances of well-meaning believers. But Leah? She still worked part-time in the chapel back in Idaho, still whispered prayers every night, still believed in miracles, however fragile. "I booked the place for 2 weeks," she continued, her voice steady. "We can extend if we need to." Stephen finally sat beside her, the couch creaking beneath his weight. "Let me see what you've got." Leah showed him the screen. She had pinned the location of the police station, the park, and several nearby churches. "I think we have a good starting point," she said. "Let's check Street View," Stephen suggested, reaching for the touchpad. "I want to see what this Prospect Park area looks like." He zoomed in on the screen, dragging the blue figure through virtual streets. The first location they examined was the community lawn, then a few blocks surrounding the park, then a turn down a narrow street lined with brick buildings and a small steepled church at the end. "That's Morrow Street," Leah noted aloud, sitting up straighter. And just as the digital view adjusted, she saw something that made her breath catch in her throat. A girl, a pink hoodie, a man beside her. Both were turned away from the camera. But the design on the back of the hoodie, a swirling heart with floral accents, was unmistakable. "Stephen," she whispered, pointing. "That hoodie. It's hers." Stephen leaned in, squinting. "Are you sure?" Leah nodded. I bought that hoodie for her 12th birthday, 3 weeks before she disappeared. It's the same one." Her voice cracked slightly. "Try turning it. Let's see if we can view their faces." Stephen rotated the camera angles, flipping through nearby frames, but every image was blurry. Faces indistinct. Shadows cast over features. "I don't know," Stephen said, leaning back. "Could be anyone. You've seen pink hoodies before, Leah." His tone wasn't unkind, just tired. "You've chased this outfit a dozen times. We can't keep doing this. It's not proof." Leah nodded, lips pressed together. But she bookmarked the street, saved the image, and flagged it anyway. "We need to be methodical, not impulsive," Stephen added. "We're seeing the police first. Then we can scout the park, put up posters, ask around." "Sound good." Leah reached for the manila folder filled with printed flyers. Each sheet bore Helena's smiling face. Long brown hair, bright hazel eyes. The words "missing since May 14th" printed in bold. 2 years' worth of grief, copied 1,000 times. She clutched them to her chest like armor. As they stepped outside, the sharp sunlight of New York hit Leah's face, and for a moment she closed her eyes, letting herself feel it. The street was bustling, loud, foreign. She opened her eyes and glanced down the avenue toward the direction of Morrow Street. It was still far, still out of reach, but the image of that pink hoodie, pixelated and ghost-like, haunted her mind. "A mother knows," she whispered to herself, gripping the steering wheel as they climbed into the rental car. "A mother always knows." The drive through Brooklyn's unfamiliar streets was tense, the kind of tension that hummed quietly between two people too emotionally drained to argue, but still walking the tightrope of a strained partnership. Leah sat behind the wheel, both hands clutched tight at 10 and 2, her knuckles pale with effort. Beside her, Stephen flipped through their compiled notes for the police, dates, times, a timeline of sightings, all color-coded and printed with military precision. The robotic voice from her GPS guided them left and right with clinical detachment, counting down the blocks until they reached the 13th precinct. As the car passed by Prospect Park, Leah slowed slightly, glancing through the window. The park buzzed with life, families on picnic blankets, couples strolling hand in hand, joggers weaving through paths with earbuds in. In the distance near a gazebo, a small crowd had gathered. A community event, just like the anonymous caller had described. Leah's hands itched on the wheel, her mouth opened halfway, as if to speak, but Stephen beat her to it. "We'll come back later," he said gently, without even looking up from a folder. "We agreed not to jump at shadows. We need backup." Trained eyes. Leah bit her lip, fighting the urge to argue. Instead, she drove on, her gaze lingering in the rear-view mirror until the crowd at the gazebo faded from view. But then, up ahead, a small green street sign appeared, Morrow Street, and something in her heart gave a lurch. She turned on the signal. "Leah, this isn't the way," Stephen said sharply, looking up from a folder. "The station is to the right." Leah didn't answer. She turned the wheel, guiding the car down the narrow road lined with brownstones and small front gardens. "I want to see the church from street view," she said. "You mean you want to see where you think you saw Helena," Stephen corrected, his tone growing firm. "We agreed not to do this." "I just need a moment," Leah said, her eyes scanning the sidewalks. "I need to pray." "You can pray in the car," Stephen said, his frustration mounting. "God isn't confined to buildings. You know that better than anyone." But Leah didn't answer. She drove slowly, scanning each face on the sidewalk, each porch, every corner, as though expecting to catch a glimpse of that pink hoodie in real life. She parked in front of a small brick church with white trim. "You just wanted to see this street again," Stephen said softly, not accusing, just resigned. "Where the girl in the photo was walking." Leah nodded. "I know it sounds irrational. I just felt this pull. Something I can't explain. Stephen sighed, rubbing his temples. We're late. The police will wait, but they shouldn't have to. I'll be quick, Leah said, already grabbing her small Bible and opening the car door. Please, just give me 5 minutes. Stephen leaned back in his seat, his jaw clenched. Fine. 5 minutes. I'll let the station know we'll be late. But this is the last detour. The church was quiet as Leah stepped through the heavy wooden doors. The interior was dim, the air cool. Candles flickered in sconces along the side walls. Sunlight filtered through stained glass, casting ribbons of color on the pews. A middle-aged man in jeans and a button-down shirt was cleaning near the altar, wiping down the wooden benches with a cloth. Leah hesitated, then approached. Excuse me, she said softly. The man looked up, surprised but friendly. Can I help you? Leah held up her phone, showing the blurry image from Google Maps. I'm looking for information. Do you recognize these two? The man squinted at the photo. Hard to tell with the faces blurred out, he said slowly. But, yeah, maybe. They do look kind of familiar. She looks like one of the girls who sometimes attends our youth service. Hard to say for sure, though. A lot of kids come through here. Leah's heart skipped. Thank you, she said. That helps more than you know. Before he could say more, a door opened at the back of the church. 2 men stepped into the sanctuary, both in clerical collars. Leah froze. One of them was immediately familiar. Her heart pounded. The taller man with gray in his beard and kind eyes stepped forward. Good afternoon, he said. I'm Pastor Grayson, senior pastor here. This is Evangelist Marcus. He's been preaching with us these past 2 weeks. Leah's blood ran cold. Marcus. She recognized him now. Evangelist Marcus, she echoed, stepping forward. I'm Leah Walters, from Chapel Pine Protestant Church in Idaho. You visited our congregation about 2 years ago. I was on the welcoming committee. I coordinated your stay. You held the healing service that Sunday. Marcus blinked, confused for a moment, then smiled. Ah, yes, of course. What a powerful day that was. I remember the woman in the wheelchair, Leah said quickly. You prayed for her. She stood. The whole church was in tears. Marcus nodded again. Yes, yes. The Lord works in mysterious ways. His tone was smooth, practiced. Leah's instincts bristled. Are you serving here now? She asked. Just guest preaching, he replied, glancing at his watch. Tonight's my last night. I'm flying out afterward. Leah nodded. Her gaze fell to his suit pocket. A slip of paper, white and thin, peeked out ever so slightly. A photograph. Leah's heart skipped again. Through the thin paper, she could see a girl's silhouette. He noticed her staring. With practiced ease, Marcus tucked the photograph deeper into his pocket. My daughter, he explained. I carry her photo with me always. That's lovely, Leah said, her mouth dry. But something was off. The outline she had seen, the shape of the girl's chin, the cut of her hair, it looked too much like Helena. Pastor Grayson stepped forward. Please, let us pray for your daughter, he said kindly. We'll ask our congregation tonight to keep her in their hearts. Leah nodded. They formed a small circle, joined hands, and bowed their heads as Pastor Grayson led the prayer. Marcus joined in, but his voice had a stiffness, like a man reciting something rehearsed. When they finished, he stepped forward to hug Leah. She accepted it, but immediately sensed something wrong. His hug lingered. He inhaled deeply, audibly, like he was smelling her hair. Leah stepped back, chilled to the bone. Thank you, she said quickly. I should go. My husband's waiting. As she turned to leave, her eyes flicked once more to his pocket. The photograph was gone, buried deep, but the memory of what she had seen and what she had felt in that hug remained vivid. Outside, Stephen stood beside the car, his posture rigid. "What took so long?" he asked as she approached. "You said 5 minutes." Leah climbed into the driver's seat. "Stephen," she said, her voice trembling. "The evangelist who visited our church, Marcus, he's here. I just spoke to him, and I think he's involved." Stephen stared at her. "What?" "I know how it sounds. But something is wrong. He had a photo in his pocket. It looked like Helena. And when he hugged me, it didn't feel right. Not at all. He smelled like her perfume. The vanilla one I gave her." Stephen hesitated, the lines on his face deepening. "Vanilla is common," he said cautiously. "Maybe it's a coincidence." Leah shook her head. "No. That scent, that photo, his reaction to me. Something's not right." "Then we go to the police," Stephen said firmly. "Right now. No more detours." Leah nodded, her fingers trembling against the steering wheel. But her eyes were locked on the church doors, just as Evangelist Marcus emerged, waving goodbye to Pastor Grayson. He walked toward a parked car. As he opened the door, a wave of vanilla-sweet fragrance drifted out. Leah's heart dropped into her stomach. "It's her perfume," she whispered. "Stephen, that's Helena's perfume." "Get in the car, Stephen," Leah said urgently, already climbing into the driver's seat, her hands moving fast, but her voice steady with purpose. "Close the door." Stephen followed without argument this time, sensing the shift in her energy, the conviction behind her words no longer fragile. "What is it now?" he asked as she turned the key in the ignition. Leah didn't take her eyes off the rearview mirror. "Didn't you smell that?" When Marcus opened his car. "That vanilla scent." Stephen blinked, trying to recall. I don't know. Could have been an air freshener." "No," Leah said firmly, pulling out of the parking space and turning onto Morrow Street, careful not to lose sight of Marcus's car up ahead. "It wasn't just any vanilla. That was Helena's perfume. The one I gave her for Christmas. The one she wore every single day. It was specific. Warm vanilla with a hint of orange blossom. She called it her grown-up smell." Stephen rubbed his jaw, tension etched into every line of his body. "Leah, even if it's the same perfume, that doesn't prove anything. You're connecting dots that might not be there." "I'm following this," Leah said through clenched teeth. "You can be skeptical. That's fine. But I'm a mother, Stephen. And I know what I know." Stephen sat back, crossing his arms, the silence thick between them. "Fine," he said finally. "Do what you need to do. But when we end up nowhere again, when we've wasted another lead, another chance to work with actual authorities, don't act surprised." Leah said nothing. Her eyes remained locked on the road ahead, trailing Marcus's sedan from a careful distance. The streets shifted around them, quiet residential blocks, giving way to wider intersections, businesses, and busier lanes. Marcus drove calmly, not in a hurry. His turn signals came on at every intersection, always predictable. Leah kept 2 cars behind, hands tight on the wheel, trying to match his speed without drawing attention. Stephen checked his phone's GPS, then muttered, "We're headed toward Park Slope. That's near JFK, isn't it?" Leah nodded. "He said he had a flight tonight. Remember? After the evening service. So what, he's going to the airport now, leaving his things behind." "He's not alone," Leah said, eyes narrowing. "Look, he's pulling into that house." They watched as Marcus turned into the driveway of a charming 2-story rental, an Airbnb sign posted in the yard. Leah drove past slowly, then turned the corner and parked down the street where they could observe without being seen. She shut off the engine and leaned forward, eyes trained on the property. "Now what?" Stephen asked, his voice heavy with fatigue. "We wait," Leah said quietly. "I need to see who's inside." Marcus entered the house alone. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Then the front door opened again, and a woman stepped out, dragging 2 large suitcases behind her. Leah recognized her instantly. It was the woman from the church parking lot, the one who had helped load bags into Marcus's trunk earlier. She had dark hair tied into a neat bun, wore a crisp white blouse, and moved with the precision of someone used to following orders. She disappeared inside again, only to return moments later with a third suitcase, small and pink, child-sized. Leah's pulse quickened. "He said he was leaving after the evening service," she whispered. "Why are they packing now?" "They could be heading to the airport early," Stephen suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. They watched as the woman opened the back passenger door, disappearing into the house once more. And then she returned, this time with a child. A girl no older than 9, with neat pigtails and a pink backpack slung over one shoulder. Leah sat up straighter, breath caught in her chest. "Is that?" But no. Her heart sank. The child was blonde, smaller than Helena. Different build, different face. She wasn't their daughter. "That must be his daughter," Stephen said softly. "Like he said." Leah exhaled, the tension releasing from her in a rush. "I really thought." Her voice trailed off. "I know," Stephen replied gently. "You were so sure." "I'm sorry," she whispered, blinking back tears. "I keep doing this. I get close. I wanted to be her so badly." Stephen reached over and placed a hand on her arm. "It's okay. You're a mother. You're not chasing ghosts. You're just refusing to give up." The two sat in silence for a moment, the weight of disappointment settling over them like fog. "Let's switch," Stephen offered. "I'll drive. We'll go to the police station like we planned. Maybe we'll still catch the detective." They stepped out of the car and switched seats. Leah slumped in the passenger side, emotionally drained. She set the GPS for the 13th precinct and watched as the familiar blue route appeared. Stephen started driving, turning them back toward the direction they came. "We did what we could," he said. "We'll talk to the police. Maybe they can follow up. Get records. Surveillance." Leah nodded, but her gaze drifted back toward the Airbnb. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. There had been too many small signs. The perfume, the photo, the tight embrace, and the pink hoodie. Minutes passed in silence. They drove past rows of row houses and cafes, their conversation reduced to thoughts unspoken. Then, as they approached an intersection, Leah spotted a familiar vehicle. "Look," she said suddenly, pointing. "That's them. They're turning." Stephen hesitated. "Leah, just slow down," she pleaded. "I want to see where they're going." "No," Stephen said firmly. "No more side missions. We're late. The police are waiting." Leah twisted in her seat, craning her neck. Through a chain-link fence, she caught sight of a playground. Children gathered near a small cafe. The woman from before greeted another adult. A small group of children formed a line, including the blonde girl from earlier. "It's a drop-off," Leah whispered. "A pickup. Some kind of group thing." "Leah, stop," Stephen said, keeping his eyes on the road. "We agreed. No more guesses. We're going to the station." Leah slumped back in her seat, watching the scene disappear in the side mirror. The disappointment cut deeper this time. "The scent, the photograph, the suitcase," she murmured. "It means something." "I know it does." "But not everything means something," Stephen replied, quieter now. "We can't let grief turn us into conspiracy theorists." They continued toward the precinct in silence. When they arrived, it was nearly an hour past their appointment. Inside, the front desk officer gave them a polite but firm explanation. Detective Monroe had moved on to another meeting. They could wait or come back in a few hours. Outside the precinct, Stephen's frustration finally broke the surface. "See what happens when we waste time," he said, pacing. "We missed the window. We delay everything. This is why we need to stick to the plan. Leah nodded, genuinely remorseful. You're right. I'm sorry. Stephen's tone softened. Let's get some food. Clear our heads. There's a diner nearby, he added. You come with. No, Leah said gently. I need to walk. Just for a bit. Clear my mind. He hesitated, but relented. Stay close. Text me. I'll message you when Monroe is available again. Leah nodded and watched him cross the street toward the diner. She turned and began to walk in the opposite direction, her eyes scanning her surroundings, mind racing with thoughts she couldn't yet put into words. Something in her chest still burned, a quiet instinct that refused to die. She pulled out her phone, opened Google Maps, and returned to the photo. The girl in the hoodie. The man walking beside her. The silhouette. Leah zoomed in as much as she could, trying to see what no pixel could clearly show. And yet, the more she looked, the more her gut screamed one truth. It was him. She was sure of it. Acting on impulse, she tapped her contacts and called someone she trusted deeply. Melissa, she said when the line picked up. I need your help. It's about Evangelist Marcus. And Helena. Melissa answered on the third ring. Leah, are you okay? Did something happen? Her voice was filled with concern, the kind of voice that had seen Leah through prayer circles, food drives, and sleepless nights. Leah paused only long enough to glance over her shoulder before speaking. Not exactly, but I need you to do something for me. Do you remember Evangelist Marcus? Melissa didn't hesitate. Of course. The healing service. The wheelchair woman. It was unforgettable. Why? Leah took a breath. He's here. In New York. And I think he's involved in Helena's disappearance. I need everything you can find on him. Melissa was silent for a beat. You think he? I'm not sure yet, Leah interrupted. But something doesn't add up. I just spoke to him. He didn't remember me until I jogged his memory. He had a photo in his pocket. It looked like Helena. And when he hugged me, he smelled like her perfume, her exact scent. Melissa gasped. You're serious. I've never been more sure about anything, Leah said. Can you dig up his background? Seminary records, travel logs, anything. And do you remember the woman in the wheelchair? The one who was supposedly healed? She filled out a visitor card, Melissa said, already shuffling through memories. We recorded her testimony too. I'll find the footage. Check the archives. Please, Leah said. And if you find a phone number, try to reach her. I need to know if she ever returned to church, or if she was even real. Be careful, Melissa warned. And keep me posted. They ended the call. Leah slipped the phone back into her coat pocket, the air suddenly feeling colder around her. Her feet moved without direction, wandering from the police station and into quieter streets. She passed cafes, art galleries, and a boutique bookstore without really seeing them. She turned a corner and found herself facing an ivy-covered brick building, imposing and aged, with a white cross affixed to a stone archway. A sign identified it as St. Anne's Lutheran Dormitory. Leah frowned. Lutheran dormitories were rare, especially in this part of the city. Curiosity tugged at her. Maybe it was the name. Maybe it was the stillness that hung over the lawn, broken only by the distant laughter of children echoing from somewhere inside. She crossed the street and pulled out her phone to snap a photo. As she approached the building for a better view, a car pulled into the lot. Her breath caught. It was Marcus's car. But Marcus wasn't behind the wheel. It was the dark-haired woman from the Airbnb, now dressed more casually in jeans and a gray sweater. In the passenger seat sat a child. Leah crouched behind a large shrub, her heart slamming in her chest. The woman stepped out of the car and left the door open, leaning against it as though waiting. Moments later, A side entrance to the dormitory opened. A woman in a nun-style uniform led out a small group of children. They each carried suitcases, some big, some small. The woman from the car walked over to them and exchanged a brief word with the dormitory keeper. The children lined up obediently, loading their luggage into the trunk. Leah counted them. 5. 5 children, all between the ages of 7 and 12. Her heart raced faster. The woman in the uniform gestured toward the car and stepped back as if her part of the exchange was complete. Leah's eyes darted from face to face, scanning each child with desperate hope. And then she saw her, a girl near the back of the group, shoulder-length hair, hazel eyes, a dimple in her left cheek. Her hands fidgeted nervously with the strap of her bag. Her eyes darted, curious but cautious. It was her, Helena. Older, thinner, hair shorter. But it was her. Leah's breath caught so sharply it felt like her lungs collapsed. For a moment, she forgot to move, forgot to think. Her daughter was right there, after 2 years. Not a memory, not a dream, alive. And so close she could count the freckles on her nose. She fumbled for her phone and called Stephen. He answered immediately. "Leah, where are you?" "Stephen," she said, barely able to keep her voice steady. "I found her. I found Helena. Get in the car and come to me now. I'm sharing my location. Call the police." "What? What are you talking about?" "It's her," Leah said. "It's really her." She hung up and quickly shared her location before returning her gaze to the group. The woman was ushering the children into the back seat, checking their seat belts one by one. Leah couldn't wait. She couldn't let that car leave. She stepped out from her hiding place and ran forward. "Helena," she shouted. "Helena, it's me." The woman from the Airbnb startled, quickly hurrying to the driver's seat. She glanced at the dormitory keeper with alarm. "Get in," she barked to the remaining kids. The dormitory woman looked confused. Leah reached the back door of a car and pounded on the window. Inside, Helena turned toward her. Their eyes met. For one frozen heartbeat, there was no city, no noise, no time. Only that moment. Helena rolled down the window slowly, her voice a breathless whisper. "Mom, is that really you?" She turned to the woman beside her. "Did God bring my mom back?" Leah pulled open the car door and reached for her daughter, sweeping her into her arms. Helena clung to her with both hands. Leah sobbed into her daughter's shoulder. "It's really me, sweetheart. I'm alive. I've been looking for you every single day." The dormitory keeper hurried forward. "What's going on?" she asked, bewildered. Leah turned to her, eyes wild with emotion. "This is my daughter. She was kidnapped from our hometown 2 years ago. We've been looking for her. She's been missing. She was taken." The woman blanched, her gaze flicking from Helena to the driver in disbelief. "I don't understand," she stammered. "These children, they're under the care of Pastor Marcus's ministry. We were told they're orphans." Tires screeched at the edge of the lot. Stephen jumped out of the car before it fully stopped. "Helena," he called. Helena turned, her eyes widening. "Dad." She flung herself into his arms. He held her so tightly it looked like he might never let go. "We found her," he whispered to Leah. "You were right. You were right all along." The woman in the driver's seat slammed her door shut and reached for her phone. "She's calling him," Leah said. "She's calling Marcus." Stephen moved in front of the car, slamming his hands on the hood. "Don't even think about it," he shouted. Sirens wailed in the distance, closer, louder. Several police cruisers pulled into the lot, officers jumping out, weapons drawn. "Police." "Stay where you are," an officer shouted. Stephen raised his hands. "We're not the threat. That woman, she's involved in our daughter's abduction." The police quickly secured the scene, separating the children, guiding Helena gently to the side. The driver was handcuffed and placed in the back of a patrol car. She didn't resist. The dormitory keeper stood stunned, shaking her head. An officer approached Leah and Stephen. "She says she's the evangelist assistant," he said. "These kids are part of his so-called discipleship program, but none are his biological children." Leah nodded, keeping Helena close. "He's at the Airbnb," she said. "He said he'd join them after his service tonight." "We'll get him," the officer assured. "You're coming with us. We'll interview you, get statements. The rest of the team is headed to the rental now. We'll arrest him before he gets away." Leah nodded. "We're coming." But we're not leaving her side. Helena gripped her mother's hand. "Please don't let go." The police escorted Leah, Stephen, and Helena into one of the patrol vehicles, keeping them close but separate from the other children and from the woman who had been driving Marcus's car. As the vehicle pulled out of the St. Anne's dormitory lot, Leah kept her arms around Helena, her grip tight and trembling. Helena's head rested against her shoulder, eyes wide, face pale. She hadn't said much since they were reunited. Her voice subdued, movements tentative, like she was still trying to understand whether what was happening was real or just another strange part of her long captivity. Stephen sat beside them, his hand resting on Helena's back, his eyes never straying from her face. "You're safe now," he whispered. "We've got you. We're here." The patrol car wound its way back through the city, but this time, Leah didn't notice the unfamiliar streets or the bustling New York sidewalks. Her focus was entirely on her daughter. She watched every blink, every breath, every slight movement of her child, as if trying to memorize her all over again. The ache in her chest wasn't pain anymore. It was something more primal, like her heart had been split and stitched back together. As they approached the Airbnb where Marcus had been staying, Leah's heart began to pound again. Police cars had already surrounded the property, red and blue lights flashing against the surrounding buildings. Officers stood in a wide perimeter, their radios crackling, their movements quick and coordinated. The car Leah and Stephen rode and parked across the street, and the officer in the front seat turned to them. "You'll stay here," he said. "Just for now. We've got a team going in." Leah nodded, clutching Helena tighter. From their window, they had a clear view of the rental home's front porch. Moments later, the door opened, and Evangelist Marcus, whose real name they would soon learn was Derek Lanton, stepped outside, carrying a small leather suitcase. He didn't look hurried or panicked. In fact, he looked calm, composed, even a little pleased with himself. That changed when he spotted the police. He froze for a split second, just long enough for the officers to move in. "Hands where we can see them," one of them barked. Marcus dropped the suitcase, raised his arms slowly, and was immediately surrounded. Officers moved in, cuffing him and leading him away. Leah's breath caught again as she watched. Their eyes met briefly as Marcus was escorted past their car. His expression didn't change. There was no fear in his face, no shame, just a cold, calculated detachment that chilled Leah to the core. As they passed, something fell from his pocket. An officer stooped to pick it up, a photograph. He brought it to the car, his face serious. "Is this your daughter?" he asked. Leah took the photo and gasped. It was Helena, a studio-style portrait, aged to reflect her current appearance. Her hair shorter, her face a little leaner, but unmistakably her. "Yes," Leah whispered. "That's her." The officer nodded grimly. "There are others in the suitcase. Different children." Leah felt her stomach turn. She looked at Helena, who had turned pale again. "It's okay," Leah murmured. "You're safe now." At the police station, they were ushered into a private family room, painted in soft blues and grays. furnished with plush couches and children's toys. Helena was given water and a warm blanket. A female officer, trained in child trauma, took her gently into a nearby interview room designed to feel like a play space. Leah and Stephen stayed behind, watching through the glass panel in the door. They didn't pressure Helena. The officer asked soft questions, gave her crayons and paper. Slowly, Helena began to talk. Her voice was small but steady. She told them everything. About the day Marcus came to pick her up, claiming Leah and Stephen had died in a car accident. About the fake funeral with pictures, candles, even 2 closed caskets. About being told she would never see her parents again, except maybe in heaven. Leah watched, tears running down her face. She believed it, she whispered. He convinced her we were gone. Stephen reached for her hand, squeezing it tightly. When Helena mentioned the tests of faith Marcus made the children endure, games, rituals, strange prayers, Stephen turned pale. He never harmed her physically, Leah said quickly. Right. The officer didn't answer right away. We're still gathering statements. But it seems he focused more on psychological control, manipulation, indoctrination, grooming them to be dependent. Leah's heart ached. She wanted to take Helena away from a police station, back to Idaho, wrap her in every blanket they owned, and never let her go again. But she knew this was necessary. They had to finish the investigation. They had to understand the scope of what happened. Later, as they sat in the family room, a detective entered. He was in his early 50s, stern but kind-eyed. Mr. and Mrs. Walters, he said, I'm Detective Monroe. First, let me say how glad I am that you found your daughter. That doesn't happen often in these cases. Leah nodded, overwhelmed. Thank you. We've arrested Marcus, real name Derek Lanton, and his assistant, Carla Benson. They're both facing charges of kidnapping, fraud, identity theft, and child endangerment. There's a long list. This isn't his first time doing something like this. What about the other children? Stephen asked. Are they with their families? We're working on it, Monroe said. Some of the kids were taken from different states. Some are still being identified. It'll take time, but we'll contact every family we can. Your daughter, she's one of the lucky ones. Leah felt her throat tighten. She didn't feel lucky, she said. She thought she lost us. But she didn't, Monroe said gently. She's back with you now. And we'll make sure no one ever takes her away again. Leah nodded. A knock came at the door. To their surprise, Pastor Grayson stepped in, looking shaken. I came as soon as I heard, he said quietly. We had no idea what kind of man we were hosting. I feel responsible. Leah stood and walked over to him. You couldn't have known, she said softly. He fooled us too. We even invited him into our church. Grayson's shoulders sagged with relief. We're canceling the evening service, of course. But if you stay in New York a little longer, I'd like to invite you to our next Sunday gathering, to share your story, to show that faith can still lead us home. Leah looked at Stephen, who nodded. We'd be honored, she said. It was a church that led us here. Later that night, they returned to their Airbnb. For the first time in 2 years, Helena fell asleep nestled between her parents, her small fingers entwined with Leah's. Stephen sat on the edge of the bed, watching them. You were right, he whispered. When you saw her on Street View, when you followed him, you were right all along. Leah brushed a strand of hair from Helena's face. Sometimes faith isn't about what you can prove, she said. It's about what you know in your heart to be true, even if no one else sees it. You saved her, Stephen said. No, Leah said. We did. It was just after sunrise the next morning when Leah Walters stepped quietly out of the Airbnb, leaving Stephen and Helena still sleeping inside. The street was quiet, washed in soft golden light, and the faint sounds of distant traffic. Leah needed space to think, to breathe, to make sense of everything that had unraveled and reassembled in the past 24 hours. She walked slowly, her coat pulled tightly around her. In her hand was her phone. Her mind kept circling back to the same questions, the same burning thoughts. Who exactly was Marcus, or rather, Derek Lanton? And how had he fooled so many? Leah sat down on a bench at the edge of a small square surrounded by cafes, just opening for breakfast service. She pulled up her recent call history and tapped on Melissa's name. The phone rang once, then twice, before her friend's familiar voice answered. Leah. I have time now, Leah said. Did you find anything? Melissa didn't hesitate. Yes. And it's worse than I thought. I dug into the name you gave me, Derek Lanton, and found discrepancies in nearly every credential he ever submitted. Seminary records? Forged. Ministry licenses? Fake. He never completed any theological training, at least not legally. Leah felt her heart sink. He faked everything. All of it, Melissa confirmed. The letters of recommendation he emailed when we invited him? Traced to disconnected numbers. Fabricated addresses. The healing service? I watched the footage again. That woman in the wheelchair? Her name was listed as Shannon Reeds, but I can't find her in any follow-up records. She never returned. I don't think she was ever a real member of the community. Leah's stomach turned. He used her as a prop, as proof of miracles. Exactly. He manipulated the church to gain credibility, to build trust. That's how he gained access. Leah stood from the bench, her nerves buzzing. He didn't just deceive the church. He preyed on it, on our faith, our hope. He saw the church as a gateway, Melissa said. Not to preach, but to find families, vulnerable children, people who wouldn't question a man of God. Leah thanked her and promised to share everything with the police. She ended the call and stood still, letting the reality of it settle. Derek Lanton had walked into their church in Chapel Pine, smiled warmly, praised the Lord, and then stolen their daughter. And they had thanked him for coming. Back at the police station, Detective Monroe led Leah and Stephen into a briefing room where several photos were laid out on the table. These were recovered from Lanton's belongings, he explained. Photos of children, some clearly printed from school websites, some surveillance stills. We believe they were targets. Most are unidentified, but a few have been matched to missing persons cases spanning 5 different states. Leah scanned the photos, horrified. Helena's picture was there, along with others, 2 boys from Michigan, a girl from Utah, another from Missouri. He kept these like trophies, Stephen said grimly, like some kind of twisted collector. We also found written notes, Monroe added, dossiers on families, church directories, handwritten sermon plans designed to appeal to specific audiences. He knew exactly what kind of message would work in each place, tailored his persona to blend in seamlessly. Did he ever work alone? Leah asked. Is there anyone else out there helping him? So far, just Carla Benson, Monroe said. But we're not ruling out the possibility of others. The dormitory staff claimed ignorance. But we're digging. Everyone's being interviewed. Your information about the fake seminary records and the woman from the healing service will help a lot. As they spoke, Helena waited in the playroom, accompanied by a trained counselor. She was quieter now, but more alert. She asked gentle questions about home, her bedroom, the family dog. She wanted to know if her favorite blanket was still folded on the corner of her bed, if her bike still leaned in the garage. She asked if anyone had painted her room while she was gone. And when she laughed, a small, careful sound, Leah wept silently in the hallway, unable to contain her gratitude. Her daughter was coming back to life, piece by piece, like a puzzle being reassembled. Later that day, the family was cleared to return to their Airbnb. Officers would remain in contact while the investigation continued. Leah and Stephen took turns answering media calls, avoiding interviews, but offering prepared statements, with help from the department's victim services team. The attention was overwhelming. But through it all, Helena stayed close, never straying far from their sides, especially at night. When the lights went out, she'd whisper, "Are you still there?" And Leah would hold her hand and whisper back, "Always." Stephen, for his part, no longer questioned instinct. He deferred to Leah's gut, the very intuition he once doubted. That evening, the family sat in silence around a small kitchen table, sharing sandwiches and slices of leftover apple pie from a nearby bakery. It was their first real meal together since the reunion. No one said much. No one needed to. The air was full of unspoken understanding. When Helena excused herself to wash her hands, Stephen turned to Leah. "Do you think she'll remember everything?" he asked softly. Leah exhaled. "Some things, yes. Some things, maybe never. But she remembers us. That's what matters." "I keep thinking about the church," Stephen admitted. "How he used it. How we trusted him." "We can't give him that victory," Leah said. "One false prophet doesn't destroy the faith of a community or of a family." Stephen nodded, his expression tired but resolute. "You followed something no one else could see. You knew. I should have trusted that from the beginning." Leah offered a small, sad smile. "We were both surviving in our own way. We just had different paths to the same place." They sat quietly until Helena returned, climbing into her father's lap and curling up against him like she had when she was 5. "I missed this," she whispered. "I missed everything." And Stephen, for once, had no words, only tears. The following day, Detective Monroe called Leah and Stephen back to the precinct. There had been developments overnight. Leah felt her stomach clench as they re-entered the now familiar building, Helena staying behind in the care of a trauma counselor who had already begun working with her. The detective met them with a tight-lipped expression and guided them to a private meeting room. Folders already laid out on the table. "We've verified Marcus's Lanton's identity," he said. "He's not just a fraud. He has a criminal history that spans multiple states under various aliases. His real name is Derek Lanton, born in Missouri, 1975. Stephen leaned forward, fists clenched on the table. "What kind of charges?" Monroe opened the first folder. Fraud, impersonation, even a few older complaints related to child custody disputes and behavioral complaints in church-run youth programs. Nothing stuck. He was always one step ahead, changing names, forging documents, hiding behind religious communities. What happened with Helena was the culmination of years of perfecting his methods. He built his identity around a false persona, Evangelist Marcus, because churches rarely question traveling preachers with convincing charisma. Leah sat back slowly, her face pale. "We invited him in. We helped him." Monroe's voice softened. "You couldn't have known. He's a master manipulator." His assistant, Carla Benson, met him during a ministry tour in Oklahoma. She was young, troubled, and desperate for purpose. He recruited her, trained her to follow his lead. We believe she helped manage logistics, booking travel, scouting churches, coordinating with institutions like St. Anne's. The dormitory staff insists they were misled as well. Everyone thought they were serving an actual children's ministry. Leah shook her head. He built an entire network, all based on lies. "And now it's unraveling," Monroe said. "We've started reaching out to families, one by one." He showed them a map with red pins scattered across states, each one a location where Derek had preached, visited, or led events. "We're tracing his movements for the past 5 years. Most children he interacted with were unharmed, but a few, like Helena, were taken. Usually one child per region. Never two from the same town. He calculated risk carefully. How long would he keep them? Stephen asked. Some a few months. Others over a year. Helena was the longest. Possibly because she was young, impressionable, and deeply religious. That made her ideal for his twisted version of faith conditioning. Leah folded her arms, her voice tight. He held her with lies, with theology twisted into control. Monroe nodded. He made them believe he was their only connection to salvation, that they were chosen. It's textbook cult-like behavior. Stephen ran a hand through his hair, and we almost let him vanish again. You didn't, Monroe said firmly, because Leah followed her instincts, and because of that, Helena is home. He turned toward Leah. And there's more. The children we rescued from the dormitory, we've begun verifying their identities. 2 already matched missing person reports, one from Kansas, the other from North Carolina. Leah's eyes filled. So more families will be reunited. Yes, Monroe said, but the process is long. The children don't always remember their real last names. Some were very young when taken. It may take time, but we'll get them home. Leah exhaled slowly, feeling the dual weight of grief and hope pressing against her chest. What happens to him now? Stephen asked. He'll be charged federally, Monroe replied, with kidnapping, child endangerment, fraud, and identity theft. He could face life in prison. We'll also open channels to pursue charges across state lines. The system will finally catch up to him. That afternoon, Leah sat with Helena in the courtyard behind the precinct building. It was a quiet space, shielded from the noise of traffic by hedges and fencing. Helena was drawing with sidewalk chalk, creating swirling loops and flowers in pink and blue. Leah watched her in silence for a while before speaking. Do you remember the last time you used chalk? Helena paused, tilting her head. At church. The sidewalk outside the back entrance. I drew a heart and wrote my name inside it. Leah smiled softly. You used to write our names inside hearts all the time. I thought if I did it enough, Helena said quietly, God would keep us together. Leah reached out and touched her daughter's hand. He did, just not in the way we expected. Helena looked up. Will I have to go back to school soon? Not right away, Leah said. We'll ease into everything. There are counselors, teachers who specialize in this. But we won't rush it. Not until you're ready. Helena nodded, her gaze drifting back to her chalk drawing. Can we go home soon? Soon, Leah promised. We just have a few more things to do. But we'll go home. Together. That evening, back at the Airbnb, they received a knock at the door. It was Pastor Grayson, holding a manila envelope and wearing a more relaxed expression than before. Leah invited him in. I just wanted to bring this, he said. It's from the congregation. Cards, letters, prayers. People have been reaching out all day. Stephen opened the envelope. Inside were handwritten notes from strangers. Messages of hope, of joy, of apology. Leah sat on the couch, holding one that read, Your courage has restored my faith in listening to the voice within. Never again will I doubt that kind of calling. Grayson lingered, then said gently, The invitation to speak at Sunday's gathering still stands. Only if you're ready. No pressure. Leah nodded. We'll be there. As he left, she turned to Stephen, tears welling again. It's strange to have all this support from people who don't even know us. It's not strange, Stephen said. It's church, at its best. Leah smiled through her tears. I needed to hear that. They sat in silence again, Helena asleep nearby, the soft rise and fall of her breathing the most sacred sound Leah had ever known. She closed her eyes and whispered a silent prayer. Sunday morning arrived with the gentle clang of church bells echoing across the Brooklyn neighborhood, their sound weaving between buildings and trees as if calling something sacred back into place. Leah Walters stood in front of the mirror in the Airbnb bedroom, buttoning the last clasp on her soft blue blouse. Her reflection looked older than she remembered, shadows under her eyes, lines near her mouth, but her eyes held a fire that hadn't been there in a long time. Beside her, Helena, now dressed in a light floral dress, sat quietly, twisting her fingers through her hair as if braiding confidence. Stephen entered, adjusting his collar, and offered a soft smile. "Are you sure about this?" he asked Leah, but his tone had changed. It wasn't resistance, it was reverence. Leah nodded. "It's not just for us. It's for every parent still searching, every child still out there. We found our daughter, but someone else might hear our story and remember something, or believe again." Helena stood and took her mother's hand. "Are we going to talk about what happened?" she asked. Leah knelt beside her. "Only as much as you're ready for. You can sit with the children if you want." At the church, Pastor Grayson greeted them at the door with a warm, grounding presence. The sanctuary was already half full, more guests arriving every few minutes. News of Helena's return had rippled through the congregation and beyond, drawing neighbors, reporters, and worshipers alike. A special area had been reserved near the front for the family, and Helena chose to sit quietly with Stephen while Leah took the small stage. The pulpit was bare except for a glass of water and an open Bible. Leah stood behind it and let the silence settle before she spoke. "I used to believe faith was something quiet," she began, her voice steady. "Something polite, predictable. But then our daughter disappeared, and I learned faith has teeth. It's stubborn. It doesn't whisper, it roars. It survives when logic collapses. When the world tells you to move on, faith stays." She paused, scanning the faces in the room. 2 years ago, our Helena vanished from our small town in Idaho. We searched everywhere, chased tips, dreams, shadows. And most of the time, we found nothing. But something in me refused to give up. Not because I'm brave, not because I'm strong, but because I'm a mother. Leah stepped from behind the pulpit, holding up one of the missing posters they had distributed across the country. "This image," she said, "became my heartbeat. I carried it everywhere. I saw her in strangers. I heard her laugh in crowds. Every day, I wondered if we were too late. But I never stopped looking. And 2 weeks ago, I saw a pink hoodie on Google Maps. A blurry image. Just a glimpse. But I knew. Something told me, that's her." And I followed that feeling all the way here, to a church in Brooklyn, a street called Morrow, and a man who wasn't what he seemed. The congregation sat in rapt attention. Some had tears in their eyes. Others sat frozen, hands clasped. Leah continued, "I met him face to face. And though I couldn't prove anything, I felt something. A wrongness, a coldness behind the smile. I smelled Helena's perfume in his car. I saw her image tucked in his pocket. And still, others told me I was wrong, that I was chasing grief, not truth." She looked out across the pews. "But sometimes the only map you have is the one drawn on your heart." And I followed it, and we found her, alive, safe. A wave of emotion moved through the room. Leah took a breath and steadied her voice. "I share this not because our story is rare, but because it shouldn't be. Because if you see something, speak. If you feel something, act. And if you're praying for a miracle, don't stop. God doesn't always move loudly. Sometimes he whispers in instincts, in blurry images, in midnight hunches." She closed the folder of posters and stepped back. "Thank you for letting us find our daughter in your city. Thank you for being the kind of church that makes space for broken families and unexpected answers." The congregation rose in applause, but it wasn't theatrical. It was quiet, reverent, full of understanding and awe. Helena peeked over at her mom from her seat beside Stephen, her face unreadable, but her eyes bright. Pastor Grayson returned to the stage, voice thick with emotion. "That," he said, gesturing toward Leah, "is what real testimony looks like. Not certainty, not perfection, just persistence and love." The remainder of the service was filled with music and prayer, songs about light breaking through darkness, about the prodigal returning, about faith being an anchor in stormy waters. Afterward, people lined up to offer hugs, prayers, and blessings. Some handed Leah envelopes. Others simply touched her shoulder and whispered, "Thank you." One older man leaned in and said, "You reminded me of my sister. She disappeared in '68. We never found her. But now, I believe we might." Leah cried with more strangers than she could count. But none of it felt strange. It felt holy. It felt earned. Later that afternoon, back at the Airbnb, Helena curled up on the couch, holding one of the notes someone had given her, a drawing from a child in the congregation. She turned to Leah. "Do you think he'll go to jail forever?" Leah sat beside her. "I think he'll never hurt anyone again. And that's what matters." Helena nodded. "I don't remember everything. Just bits and pieces. Sometimes I feel like I dreamed it." "That's okay," Leah whispered, brushing her fingers through her daughter's hair. "What matters is that you woke up. And we're here, together." Stephen joined them, placing a warm cup of tea in Leah's hands. "What do you want to do tomorrow?" he asked. Helena smiled faintly. "Can we just walk? See the city? Look at the buildings?" Leah smiled. "Of course. Anywhere you want." As evening fell, the sky outside turned a soft purple, and for the first time since arriving in New York, the little rental home felt like a place of rest. Not just temporary shelter, not just a base of operations, but a sanctuary, a space where healing had begun. And though Leah knew the road ahead would be long, filled with therapy sessions, flashbacks, and moments of fear, she also knew the hardest part was behind them. They had faced the unthinkable, and they had survived, together. And that, she reminded herself, was enough. 2 days later, back inside the cool hum of the precinct's interior, Detective Monroe led Leah and Stephen into an evidence room with a solemn expression. He placed a manila folder and a sealed evidence bag on the table and gestured for them to sit. "We've concluded the initial search of Derek Lanton's rental," he said, "and we've confirmed that he kept extensive documentation on nearly every child he encountered. He built what can only be described as profiles, part psychological, part behavioral, part spiritual. He labeled them as disciples in preparation." Leah felt her stomach turn as Monroe opened the folder. Inside were pages of typed notes, photographs, and sketches, some done by hand, others printed from databases or social media. "This one," Monroe said, pointing to the top sheet, "is Helena's." The page detailed personal habits, preferences, a fake medical record, and a forged death notice for Leah and Stephen. It even included a fabricated funeral program. Leah's hands trembled as she picked up the document. He had a script, a whole narrative, down to the hymns sung at our funeral. Monroe nodded grimly. He was preparing to move on with a new group, a different dormitory, more children. Stephen clenched his jaw, looking at another photo. How many more were there? "We believe he was grooming 4 new children," Monroe said. "But we intercepted his plan in time. Those children have been removed from St. Anne's and are in protective custody. He intended to rotate them through shelters, keep them isolated from records, just like Helena. But now we have enough digital and physical evidence to shut down every operation he built." Leah looked through the rest of the folder, each page a deeper descent into Lanton's disturbed methodology. He thought he was a prophet, she whispered. He used scripture, Monroe confirmed, but always twisted. He altered parables to justify obedience, submission, silence. He rewrote parts of the Gospel of Mark, passages about rebirth and sacrifice. And the children, they believed him, because he was the only adult they saw regularly. The only one who prayed with them, who gave them structure. They weren't beaten. They were conditioned, gently, consistently, like water shaping stone. Leah sat back in her chair, the room spinning faintly around her. I need to tell Helena, she said. I need her to know she wasn't weak, that what happened to her wasn't her fault. Monroe leaned forward. She was strong. So are you. And she's going to need you to remind her of that in the years ahead. He slid a new sheet forward. There's one more thing. Something we found encrypted on a USB drive. Videos. Confessionals. Sermons. But one of them is different. It's Lanton speaking directly to someone. A private message. Possibly for Carla. Possibly for someone else in his network. He pressed play on a laptop. On the screen, Derek Lanton appeared in front of a neutral gray backdrop, speaking slowly and with eerie calm. If you're watching this, I've been caught, he said. I always knew it might end this way, Lanton continued in the recording, his eyes unblinking. But know that the work must go on. These children, they are special. They are chosen. This world doesn't deserve them. That's why we must separate them, rebuild them, teach them how to survive the tribulations ahead. Leah reached to pause the video, unable to watch further. He believed it, she murmured. He really believed he was saving them. That level of conviction, Monroe said, combined with charm, is what made him so dangerous. But now he's off the street. And with your help, others will never disappear. Later that afternoon, Leah sat with Helena in a sun-drenched corner of the precinct's family support wing. They'd been given the space to process, to decompress, to begin healing slowly. Leah pulled out a small photo album she'd assembled over the past week, a timeline of Helena's life before the disappearance. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, church bake sales. Helena flipped through them quietly, eyes lingering on each photo with a soft furrow in her brow. I remember this one, she said finally, pointing to a picture of her in a ladybug costume from a fall festival. I spilled apple cider all over it. Leah laughed gently. And then you cried because you thought it meant the costume was cursed. Helena smiled faintly, but then her expression darkened. He said you were in heaven, that you watched me from the clouds. I know, Leah said softly, but he lied. About everything. And it's okay if you believed him. That doesn't make you wrong. That makes you human. You were trying to survive. Helena's eyes filled. I wanted to believe you were alive. But then I thought, if I believed that too much, maybe I'd never see you in heaven. So I stopped. Leah's heart broke at the words. She pulled her daughter close. We never stopped looking for you. Not once. And there is nothing you could do to make us stop loving you. Helena clung to her for a long while, the photo album still open on the floor. Later, when they returned to the Airbnb, the family prepared a simple dinner. Helena insisted on helping, peeling potatoes, setting the table. It wasn't about food. It was about participating, controlling something, reclaiming her space. After they ate, she asked if she could use Leah's phone to call Grandma June back in Chapel Pine. Leah smiled. She's going to be so happy to hear your voice. They watched as Helena paced the living room, speaking shyly at first, then giggling, then suddenly crying. Leah stepped in quietly, wrapping her arms around her daughter from behind. It's okay, she whispered. Let it out. That night, before bed, Helena placed the photo album beneath her pillow. In case I dream, she explained. Leah nodded and tucked the blanket tighter around her. "We're here," she said. "We're not going anywhere." And as she turned off the light, the faint glow of the hallway lamp spilled into the room like a silent promise that darkness, while still present, would never rule again. A week after the arrest of Derek Lanton, the Walters family stood at LaGuardia Airport, their bags packed, boarding passes in hand, waiting for their flight home to Chapel Pine, Idaho. The terminal buzzed around them with the usual chaos of travel. Families wrangling toddlers, business people speaking urgently into phones, couples rushing to gates. But for Leah, everything moved in quiet contrast. The noise didn't matter. The crowds didn't matter. Only the small hand in hers, warm and certain. Helena, in a hoodie 2 sizes too big and jeans scuffed at the knees, stood calmly by her side, head leaning into her arm. Stephen joined them from a coffee stand, holding 3 warm drinks. They didn't have vanilla, he said with a half smile, but they had hazelnut. Helena took hers and smiled faintly. "It smells kind of the same." Leah saw it then, not just the faint smile, but the way Helena sipped slowly, cautiously, and closed her eyes for a moment, like she was letting herself enjoy something without fear. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. She looked over at Stephen and found him already watching her. No words passed between them. They didn't need any. Everything had changed. The flight boarded on time, and they settled into their row near the wing. Helena took the window seat, Leah the middle, Stephen the aisle. As the plane taxied, Helena leaned against the glass, watching the runway stretch into the distance. "When we land," she said softly, "will my room still look the same?" Leah nodded. "It's just like you left it, except I added one thing, a bookshelf. You always talked about wanting one." Helena turned and smiled. "I think I want to read now. I didn't before, but I want to learn about other girls. Ones who get through things." Leah swallowed the lump in her throat. "Then we'll find books. As many as you want." The plane lifted into the sky, the city falling away beneath them. Helena kept her eyes glued to the window as clouds drifted past. "I used to dream about this," she said. "Flying away, not being afraid." Leah reached for her hand. "Then let this be the beginning." When they landed hours later, the quiet stretch of countryside surrounding Chapel Pine was almost jarring in contrast to the city they'd left. Trees rustled in the breeze. The air smelled of pine and turned leaves. At home, neighbors had decorated their front porch with welcome signs and potted flowers. A hand-sewn banner hung from a fence. "Welcome home, Helena." But what moved Leah most was the stillness. The sacred silence of returning to something unchanged yet profoundly different. Helena walked slowly through the front door, her shoes scraping across the hardwood. "It smells the same," she whispered. She stepped into the living room, then into the hallway, pausing at the threshold of her bedroom. Leah let her go alone. Helena opened the door and stepped inside. The room was untouched, posters still on the walls, stuffed animals lined neatly. She crossed to the bed and lifted the covers, then peeked into the drawer where she used to keep her sketchbooks. One of them was still there. She opened it and smiled at the first page, a drawing of their family standing in front of the church. She turned back toward the hallway and called, "Mom." Leah appeared instantly. Helena held up the sketchbook. "Can I draw something new?" Leah stepped inside. "Absolutely." They spent that evening curled on the couch watching old home movies, Helena asking quiet questions, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying. When Stephen played a clip of her 7th birthday, she whispered, "I remember this cake." Later, after dinner and baths and brushing teeth, Leah tucked Helena in for the first time in 2 years. She sat on the edge of the bed, running her fingers through her daughter's hair. "Are you okay?" she asked. Helena nodded. "Mostly. Some nights might still be scary, though." "That's okay," Leah said. "I'll be right here. And if you need me, anytime, day or night, you just say the word." Helena pulled the blanket to her chin. "I missed this part the most." Leah leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Good night, my brave girl." She turned off the lamp, leaving the door slightly open. Downstairs, Stephen stood at the window, looking out across the moonlit front yard. "I thought I'd never see her here again," he said. Leah wrapped her arms around him from behind. "But here she is." He turned toward her. "What now?" Leah smiled. "Now we live. Slowly. Gently. We heal. We take walks. We go to therapy. We argue over what to cook for dinner. We remember what it feels like to be ordinary." "You think ordinary will ever feel normal again?" Stephen asked. Leah took a long breath. "I don't know. But we'll figure it out. One morning at a time." The next day, Leah sat alone in her small home office, opening the church newsletter draft for the upcoming month. She hadn't touched it in months. But today, something urged her to write. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before she began typing. Faith isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper you follow even when the road is dark. Sometimes it's a mother staring at a screen, zooming into an image no one else sees. And sometimes it's just holding on when everything else says let go. She paused, then typed the title, "A Street Called Morrow." At the bottom, she added a note, dedicated to every family still searching. "May you never stop." And with that, she hit send. Upstairs, Helena sat on her bed with her sketchbook. She was drawing again, her family in the church pew, sunlight coming through stained glass, and a small cross hung above the altar. Below it, she wrote a single line, "I was never lost, just waiting to be found." And in that quiet room in a quiet house in Chapel Pine, a girl who had vanished and returned closed her book, curled into bed, and finally, peacefully, fell asleep. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life inspired mysteries. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you believe in the power of faith, write a prayer for Helena and children like her down below.